Okay, we're going to do problem number 2. So we're going to do it the same way. Remember, if you have a polynomial with 4 terms, you can use the grouping method in order to figure out what it looks like in factored form. So I'm going to, here's my first and second term. I'm going to put a parentheses around them and group them. And I'm going to put a parentheses around my first and second term. Then I'm going to look at just my first set, and I'm going to go to the smallest number. So the smallest number is 10. So factors of 10 are 1 and 10, and 2 and 5. And then I'm going to list my 3 m's. Now when I go to factors of 12, I'm going to start with my list over here. Does 10 go into 12 evenly? No. Does 5 go into 12 evenly? No. Does 2 go into 12 evenly? Yes, 2 and 6. So I started with 10 because it's the biggest. Remember, I want the biggest. So if this is the smallest number, I can start with the biggest stuff and figure out what goes over here. And then I have 2 m's. And if you are a little confused again on why I chose 2 and 6, and maybe I didn't write 1 and 12, I can write 1 and 12, but it's never going to work because 12 is never over here. It's too big. 1 is, but that wasn't the greatest. So that's why you want to start with the biggest number on your list to figure out which one they have in common. So now if I look, I know it's 2. So I can circle 2. And then m's, this has 3, this has 2. So the most they have in common is 2, so I can circle 2 from each. So that means on the outside, my greatest common factor between these two is 2m squared. And then I have to figure out what I have left. Well, you can think about it in a number of ways. I can cross this one out because I didn't use it. And I can just look at, well, there's a 5 and an m left here, and there's just a 6 left here. You're going to recognize that's what we end up here. Or you can use the division. 10 divided by 2 is 5. I have m3s, and I took out m2, so I'm left with 1m. 12 positive divided by 2 is positive 6. I had 2 m's, and I took out 2 m's. And if you notice, see, 5m, not circled, 6, not circled, and it's positive. Okay. We're going to go on to parentheses number 2. Now this one is a little bit tricky because there's a minus sign in front of the 35 or a negative sign. So I'm going to show you what we're going to do with that. But for right now, we're just going to do the same method. So 35, 1 and 35. And the only other one is 5 and 7 and an m. So again, I'm going to start with the biggest thing, 35. If I do 42 divided by 35 in my calculator, it is not a whole number. If I do 42 divided by 7, I do get a whole number. I get 6. So there it is. So what they have in common is the 7. And this has an m, but this doesn't. So that's it. Now, because this is a negative, you want the beginning of your inside parentheses to be positive. So that means you need to take out the negative 7. So that's going to be the only difference here between number 1. So again, because this is negative in the front, you want to put the negative on the outside with whatever the greatest common factor is. So now when I divide, okay, I didn't use this one, so I can cross it off. I know it's a 5, but it's a negative 35 divided by a negative 7. So that gives me a positive 5. I didn't take the m, so I leave the m. And now this is a negative 42 divided by a negative 7. A negative 5 by a negative is a positive, and what's left? 6. Now I know I'm right because I got my nice 2-for-1 special. Here it is, the 2-for-1 special. So that I'm going to write once. And I used it, so I'll cross it off. And now I have to figure out, okay, well, where's my next parenthesis come from? Well, that comes from the only other stuff that's left. I used the 2-for-1, so it has to come from this. So I would have 2m squared minus 7.